Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Yeah, we're taping at a weird time.
I don't know where your headspace is at. You're firing all cylinders, at 9:30 in the morning. Now, are you a little foggy midday? Got a little 3 martini lunch at the Daily Caller offices? You're not quite on your A game.
No 3 martini lunch, sadly, but I do think I'm probably a little bit better in the morning normally. I take my audio podcast, in the afternoon, and I definitely think there's a little drop off in terms of that. Low energy, as Trump might say, this time of day, but we'll try to do our best.
So on the Trump rating score, how would you rate the Democratic debate? Was it a high energy debate, a low energy debate? Do you feel like the Democrats did themselves well last night?
I'm trying to remember what he said. Trump was actually on Morning Joe this morning, and he actually, I forget how he put it. I think he said they all
we praised Hillary. He said Hillary did what she had to do. But this is a guy who, just a month ago was saying, I'm not sure she's even going to get to the nomination. Who knows where this email scandal leads? And now he's the personification of conventional wisdom, saying that she won the debate like all the other pundits are saying.
What is really weird, I mean, the turnaround for Hillary has been pretty remarkable. She had, 6 or 9 months of pretty bad press, and there was a point where she looked incredibly vulnerable. And ever since the Kevin McCarthy gaffe, if you want to call it that, sort of opened the door for her, it has been a turnaround. And I think that the debate was a prime example of that. I think Trump's right. She did quite well. And I think she clearly won the debate. And I think probably made it very unlikely now that Joe Biden gets in.
Well, the big moment of the debate that people keep talking about is the email comment from Bernie.
Yeah.
Because yes, she did well just on her own merits, but what has lasting effect beyond the debate? And Hillary had for months been saying, nobody talks to me about these emails, nobody cares, and that got treated in the media as, well, I'm talking to people in Iowa and they are asking me about it, so what you're telling me is not true. Mm-hmm. And the poll numbers kept drifting downwards to also just suggest it was not true. But what I think that was missing was Democratic voters cared to the extent they worried about the political impact of it. Not that they actually were unnerved that she did something scandalous. They worried that what did it mean about her ability to win the general election? Yeah. So it's a bit of a circular media loop that they were in.
Yeah, but I think so much of what she did was misdirection, and that this is part of that. It's utterly consistent with how she handled all sorts of things. So, for example, it's not whether or not she had poor judgment in going and voting to go into Iraq. It's whether or not Martin O'Malley endorsed her in 2008, therefore making him a discredible and incredible, whatever the word is, a not credible spokesman to attack her on it. And I think this is similar to that, right? In the regard that the email thing really is very serious, and the fact that Bernie Sanders doesn't think that's dispositive, like the fact that Bernie Sanders doesn't think that it's a big deal. Why does that matter at all? Except it matters completely in the context of the debate.
Well, I think it matters in that, Bernie voiced, when I wrote back in May that Hillary was going to be the nominee, part of my now world famous Hillary versus Jeb piece.
Oh no, we need to shamelessly self-promote this stuff. Check it out, people. Click the ads.
And so part of the Hillary argument in that was that the email stuff would not weigh her down because Democratic voters have Clinton fatigue, that they just don't want to hear all this Clinton stuff over and over, this scandal narrative over and over again. They were going to shake it off. Now, it didn't really look that way since I wrote that for the last 5 months. But to have Bernie voice that, to voice what Clinton fatigue is, and have the crowd respond uproariously across the board, that gives validation to what Clinton is saying, that at minimum, Democratic voters do not care.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you're absolutely right. But I do want to make the larger point, which is there's a very serious question over whether or not, Hillary clearly Hillary used a private email, had a private server. There are very serious questions, including could there have been potential hacking? Was that a national security hazard? That has nothing at all to do with the fact that Bernie Sanders thinks it's not a big deal. And yet, in the context of the debate, it matters a lot, just like the fact that Hillary Clinton's vote to go into Iraq, the fact that Barack Obama appointed her to be Secretary of State later really has nothing to do with whether or not that was an example of Hillary having horrible judgment on what Bernie Sanders himself described as like the number one, I forget how he termed it, quagmire in American history. So my point only is to say that Hillary, I think, was engaging in sophistry with a little help from her friends in the case of Bernie Sanders coming to her aid there. And it really worked in the debate, but I don't know that it will work forever.
Well, that's why I want to ask you, man. I don't want to go back and forth about the merits of every single Hillary answer, but this is sort of the interesting question: is the way Hillary handled those sorts of questions going to be sufficient in a general election? So you say that was misdirection and sophistry. Now, there's a degree of misdirection. I mean, I think every politician engages in misdirection when given a debate question that is not on favorable terms to them. That's a pretty standard debate tactic. Does she do it well enough that she would be able to handle what a Republican would throw at her in a debate, or would she have to step up her game? I guess what I'm getting at is when you look at the overall debate performance, do you feel like, you know what, it really wasn't that good, just the opposition wasn't really giving her what for, she'll be taken apart in a general? Or did she did what she needed to do in this context, but you could see just her general debate prep skills are such that you think she would be tough to deal with in a general election regardless? Yeah,
I think, okay, so first of all, I think that you make a good point. I think it could work in a general election. In other words, yes, she is engaging in misdirection and sophistry, and yes, it could work in a general election because people might fall for it. They very well might fall for it. General election voters very well may fall for it. The media very well may fall for it, even though a keen observer such as yours truly, and I'm sure you too, Bill, see what she's doing. It may still work, and I would say,
what wasn't the great Ronald Reagan debate mode of 1984 about his age classic misdirection? I mean, wasn't that one of like the top 10 debate misdirection moments of all time?
There you go again, Bill. There you go again.
Misdirection as 1980. It's more misdirection.
Well, I would argue that there's a difference. I mean, okay, Reagan was clearly old. There was no hiding that, and I think he played it well. As opposed to, I don't know that it's a perfect analogy, but anyway, point well taken. All politicians have to engage in this a little bit. I think she was pretty darn good at it, and I will say this, Bill. I think I've been critical of some in the sort of populist Tea Party right for conflating toughness with ideology and sort of fetishizing this machismo toughness quality. I think when you see how good Hillary Clinton was and how tough she is as a debater, it does make sense. And I think there's only I don't want to say a handful, but not all Republicans could go toe-to-toe with her. And I think, but the ones who could tend to be disproportionately the ones that the Tea Party populist right like. So I think that Ted Cruz, I can imagine him being in that debate stage with her and holding his own, if not winning. I can imagine Chris Christie being tough enough for that. I can imagine Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina being tough enough for that. And I can imagine Rubio possibly. Certainly smart enough, but you got to be tough too.
You're leaving Jeb off?
I'm leaving Jeb off.
You're not on Team Jeb?
I'm leaving Carson off. I'm leaving Jeb off. I'm leaving Kasich off. I think that there are Republican candidates, and I'll include Jeb Bush in this category, that I imagine I imagine losing to Hillary on the debate stage based on quickness, toughness, whatever. By the way, attributes that do not necessarily have that much to do with being president, although clearly being tough, you can see that being tough would come in handy as president. But not all of the attributes that make one a good debater would necessarily make one a good president. But it is interesting. I would just say that when I saw Hillary on the debate stage and how strong she looked and how good she was, it made me think, who could go up against her? And I think those are the candidates.
I mean, I would think that you see, it's not that she is, super charismatic. I mean, that's not her strong suit. I mean, where Hillary, and I think I've said this in past shows, I mean, Hillary's, inherent strength is her wonkiness, her command of issues, a sense that she is fully prepared for whatever comes at her, a general unflappability when there are setbacks, and all that. Those are the things she uses to her advantage in these debates. And if I was a Republican, this would be a sobering moment. Sure, it was fun to talk about Trump and Carson and Fiorina, but there's going to be a real debate in October of 2016 that's going to actually deal with substantive issues. And there's going to be somebody up there who's going to seem extremely competent when it comes to policy. And if I put up, some numbnut, we're gonna get the floor wiped with us. So I would think it would just take Trump and Fiorina, as tough as they are in debates. I think that would just totally disqualify them. It's now time to look at people who have actual experience in government.
Yeah, except it's not like a college debate where someone's going to be judging the points scored. I mean, Trump is a really good talker, and the fact that he may not have command of the facts might not matter as much as you think. You and I might come away thinking, wow, Trump really didn't know anything about Pakistan, but the public may like it. So, I want to go back to the toughness thing, though, because I do think that there is a thing where you've got to be. I think that there's a primal sort of aspect to these debates. We saw it with Al Gore. Remember the 2000 debate where Al Gore sort of stands up and walks over to George W. Bush, and I think very obviously tries to intimidate Bush, and Bush handled it really well. Now with Hillary, the dynamic's going to be a little different because she's a female, but she's tough and she's smart. And I think that we clearly see that there were people on that debate stage, say like Lincoln Chafee, who were did not sort of have a commanding presence. And I think you could imagine someone like a Jeb Bush who's physically imposing, but sort of has this little bit of a wimpy demeanor about him, not playing well. There is a bit of a I don't even know how to describe it other than primal, sort of a machismo quality. You have to be very serious. And in fact, I was wrong about Carly. I thought that Carly Fiorina in that first debate, didn't smile enough, came across as sort of too mean, too tough. And I was completely out of touch because, at least amongst likely Republican voters, she was seen as like the Iron Lady. So, I don't know. I'm seeing it a little bit through that prism right now, Bill. I don't know if you disagree.
I think I do, because I feel like it's not just about I have more facts than you. I don't think that's quite it. I don't think it's that Hillary wins debates on points. I think it's a persona that comes through that I am unquestionably the most qualified person for this job based on how I am talking about these issues. I know you're not taking notes on what I'm saying, but that's
portrayed or betrayed in body language, body language that demonstrates that you were in command of the facts. I don't want to become one of these body language analysts or whatever. That's not what I'm getting at. But I'm not going to say like she was templing too much or so her she was making bad hand gestures or something. But no, but like when you have confidence, even if you're lying, if you project that you believe what you're saying in a strong way, and I think Jeb's very bad at that, and I think someone like Trump and Hillary even are very good at that.
But going back to Trump or Fiorina, I mean, these are guys they don't, Trump almost makes it a point of pride that he refuses to have policy details. And Fiorina, I mean, last time I went to her webpage, she still doesn't have an issues page. I mean, she literally does not talk about policy positions at all. She just is a wind up toy of talking points.
Yeah.
Well delivered. But I would just think, head to head with someone who's actually getting into a degree of policy substance. I mean, it's not even like it's that big a policy seminar here, but it's at least enough to convey I know what I'm talking about.
Maybe the dichotomy would show through, but maybe it wouldn't. I mean, the old Bill Clinton line. See, I'm off my game, Bill. It's afternoon. The old Bill Clinton line, better to be strong and wrong than right and weak. I think also could be, like a corollary to that might be better to be strong and not know the facts than to be weak and to be a weak womp.
But you can see that Hillary doesn't come across weak. No, she doesn't. She has a strong persona.
No, you're right. She doesn't. But my point is that Trump could, confidence and toughness cover a multitude of sins. And when Trump says to Hugh Hewitt, I have no idea who Soleimani is, but guess what? 24 hours after I become president, I'm going to know everything there is to know about the Quds Force, and I'm going to know more than you'll ever know. That might work in a debate type situation, and that's Trump's.
I can't say it working vis-a-vis Hillary. I mean, I'm not saying Hillary is an unstoppable force. I just think that is a terrible matchup versus Hillary. I mean, here you have where you could go at Hillary. I thought it was very interesting that she made a pretty extended defense of the record on Libya. Not just herself, her diplomatic role, but also the military execution and the aftermath. And, she didn't flinch even at the Benghazi question that gets raised when you do that. I mean, as you know, the Libyan aftermath is not squeaky clean. I mean, I would personally defend the record too, but it's not exactly certainly not a cut and dry discussion to have.
No, she did a really good job, and you tweeted the winner of the debate tonight was debate prep, and I think that was a pretty smart comment. I think she clearly had anticipated every criticism, every attack, and had a plausible but misleading answer for everyone.
So if you're going to go up against that, you better have something substantive to say in response about Libya. And if you don't have your facts on Libya, you're going to get totally housed on that.
You may be making the argument. The conclusion of this may be that Republicans should nominate Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. That may be, and I know others have said that that's where that's sort of what it'll come down to. I mean, who knows? But
I would say my logic follows to Jeb or Rubio. I think Jeb or Rubio are the only plausible general election candidates in that lot, with the exception of Kasich, who can't run for other reasons.
Combine my logic that you have to be tough with your logic that you have to know what the hell you're talking about. And I think that disqualifies Jeb. Because I think the toughness thing. I think you come down with Rubio, who would have to work on the toughness part, and Cruz, who would probably have to work on the likability and knowledge part, maybe. Although he's very smart and clearly knows foreign policy. I do want to ask though, because we're on a limited time today. My fault, of course. Crazy day today. But we haven't really talked about Bernie or O'Malley or Webb or whoever the other guy was. So I found myself liking Jim Webb and thinking he was a Republican. So,
well, I think that I would not be surprised if there is a Webb bump after this. Now, almost every Democrat watching was incredulous about Webb. They recoiled at his comments about the Iran deal, about Black Lives Matter, his tortured arguments about affirmative action, where he basically was dismissing any kind of race-based affirmative action. So I am not arguing that there is going to be any plausible chance that Webb would be the nominee in a modern Democratic Party. But there are conservative Democrats remaining. Not many, but there are some. Kim Davis was a Democrat until very recently. I mean, there are people like that, particularly in red states, because they vote Democrat for local races or state races, but they vote conservative, Republican, and federal races. But they are registered as Democrats and vote in the primaries. So and there are primaries in every state. These people do get a vote.
As Jerry Seinfeld might say, "Who are these people? Why don't they change the party registration already? Are they waiting for Grandma to die? Grandma, the FDR voter to
look. The Democrat there. You tweeted this out recently. There is an anti-abortion conservative Democrat running for governor in Louisiana who might win. Who's actually polling pretty well.
Yes, against David Vitter.
If it's him versus Vitter, the Democrat might win that race.
Yeah.
If you're that kind of Democrat, and whether you were watching the debate or you see the clips afterwards about how Jim Webb killed a man, you might say to yourself, that kind of guy's on the stage. I might vote for that guy. I didn't know he existed before. Now I know. So you might go from 0 to 5, in the next set of round of polls, just on that basis alone. And then that might lead to a whole bunch of web momentum and web media coverage and whatnot.
Though I feel like there was decades where, the way you got elected president was to be Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter, like a white male Southern conservative Democrat who didn't scare America by being too liberal. And that lasted for a long time. But I feel like O'Malley, not that O'Malley's conservative, but I feel like O'Malley and Jim Webb would have been great candidates in 1992. Just like Jeb Bush would have been a great candidate in 1998. And I feel like their time is past. They're living in a bygone era, essentially.
Well, in the case of Webb, I'm getting extremely speculative now. But let's say Webb gets this minor bump out of this, and that feeds his ego to some extent, but obviously realizes there's no room for me in this modern Democratic Party. This is not a guy who's been a Democrat for very long. He could well say, there's a constituency for me out there. Why don't I run third party and try to milk it? What do I have to lose? It would depend on him getting a little bit of oxygen right now.
Well, I'm not too optimistic about the Webb bump, but maybe I'll be wrong about that.
Let's talk more about Bernie though.
Yeah,
because I think the Bernie fans were very happy with Bernie. Bernie was quintessentially Bernie. Some have even gone as far as that to suggest he might that he might end up being the eventual winner, because now his name recognition will increase, and if more voters know he's out there and like what he had to say, maybe his numbers would go up after this. I personally don't think that's going to hold true, because to the extent that people like what he has to say, it's still so much of it is critique and idealism. And I think Hillary effectively played the pragmatist card on him to say, look, I'm clearly the more plausible general election candidate and commander-in-chief here. As much as you might like what he has to say, he's not going to win in the general.
Denmark, there was something about his answer on Denmark wasn't ready for prime time.
That's what he was asked about, being a socialist, not a capitalist. And his response is, well, I don't support the casino capitalism that hurts the little guy. I want America to be like these wonderful Scandinavian countries like Denmark.
Right.
What's wrong with wanting to emulate that? And that's always been his go-to answer when he always has felt like, if I get the opportunity to define what I mean by socialism, it will go down easier. I'm not talking about Soviet Russia. I'm talking about these wonderful Scandinavian countries you would love to vacation in someday. But I think Hillary has the better electability argument there.
Isn't it funny when people think that they have they think that they have like the perfect answer, and they're like almost like begging you know what I mean? Like they think they've got the jerk store called. They think they've got the perfect like comeback or answer, and like I'm sure other people knew that was not going to work, that was not going to fly, but Bernie was convinced, and I'm sure he's utterly stunned that answer didn't like knock everybody over and blow everybody away.
Well, I don't know if Bernie's flat out delusional, but I do think that
Most candidates are, Bill. Have you been around any of these political candidates?
I mean, he definitely has been on this. He's been saying these things for 4 decades. I mean, this is a pitch that he has been refining for 4 decades, and the whole campaign is to test run how good can this message go. So he's not inclined to run a focus group and have his pollsters tell him, that Denmark answer really doesn't work when we talk about swing state voters in Colorado, so why don't you do something else? He doesn't want to hear that. He didn't do traditional debate prep before this. He's just doing what he does. And there's a limitation to doing it that way. I mean, obviously, there's an authenticity to it. You'll get hardcore fans doing it. But going the full distance, you're probably not going to get there with that. And Hillary was pretty pointed. I mean, I wrote before the debate, how do you attack Bernie when everybody loves the guy so much in the Democratic base? That's like kicking your grandpa in the face. That's a hard tack. And
I think I quoted that somewhere too.
And Clinton, went very carefully around that line and didn't quite cross it to the point where Bernie, after being, popped a couple times by Hillary, gave her this massive lifeline by the end of the debate. So I don't think, as good as Bernie's performance was for Bernie, it wasn't a general election campaign kind of performance.
I think 2 things can be true. I think that Bernie can have a good night that fires up Bernie fans, and I think Hillary can have a good night that basically tamps down the criticism, puts to bed or puts to rest some of the attacks, and basically keeps Joe Biden out of the race and freezes him out. So,
but that's a tie that goes to Hillary. The state of the race as it stands, yes, Hillary numbers have been going down, but if it's stabilized at this point, she's ahead.
But I think the real winner then, if those things being true, the real winner then I think is the Democratic Party. I think it's a good night for them. Which we don't know how debates sometimes are not always good nights for the party that hosts them. And I think that based on what we saw, that of those things are true, it's a good night for Democrats.
So to that point, Marin O'Malley's close. O'Malley had a generally limp debate. He couldn't get a breakout moment. He tried to go to Hillary a couple times. Went at Bernie on guns at one point. Never really landed a blow. But his close got a huge response from the crowd where he said, look at what on the stage you didn't see anyone being a racist. You didn't see anybody denigrating women. You didn't see anybody denigrating someone's religion. This is a wonderful contrast between us and the Republicans, essentially. From your vantage point, do you think O'Malley's right that this makes the party look good? Even Bernie's socialism isn't a scary socialism that makes the middle of the country recoil. Whereas you see Trump and Carson and Cruz on the dominating the Republican debate stage, and the middle of the country says that's bonkers. I don't need to go back to that now, especially seeing the chaos in the House right now.
Well, I think so. But look, I think I'm sort of ironically biased against Republicans since I'm much more concerned in their future and their fate, and I'm writing a book about it. I'm more attuned and a little more skeptical or critical of them because I care about their future more, and it's something I'm focused on. The other thing, too, is, I forget how many, there's been like 20 Republican debates. Until last night, there had been like 20 Republican debates since there'd been a Democratic debate in 2008. So, look, okay, they had a good night. They had a good debate. They got, 5 more to go? Let's see if everybody keeps playing nicely together. That's one good night. I think it was a win for the Democrats. And, I think my guess is the contrast favors them. Let's see if they keep it going that way. The question is, does somebody like O'Malley or Bernie ever decide that they really want to win and that the way to do it's to go after Hillary or not?
Well, they certainly could get more fractious. I think that's been the case in most debate trajectories, that they don't necessarily take all the gloves off right away. Right. I think there was some thought that maybe they would this time because there's not as many debates and they're running out of time, and they might even not be invited to the next debates if they can't get their numbers up. So this was the time to shine. But putting aside just the possible personal attacking, I saw some conservative tweeting about how, look how far the left these guys are going. This party is so much more to the left than they were 20 years ago. And that's just not my reaction to it. I don't feel like what they're saying is, I don't think anything's being said that's going to be thrown back at them in the general election as somehow horrible to the middle.
But there was a time
self-deportation was thrown back at Romney in 2012. Whereas I look at the Republican debates now, and I think Jeb and Rubio, for the most part, are being pretty careful. You mentioned before Rubio went a little far on abortion in one of the debates that he could get hurt by that. But seeing Trump dominate the immigration discussion doesn't help the Republican Party brand with Latinos. So are you seeing anything in these Democratic debates that makes you think, they're gonna pay for that one later? That was too far to the left, and that's gonna drag them all down in a year.
No, because I think the culture has shifted leftward, and I think that there was a time when it'd be implausible for somebody who's a socialist to run for president, and get the traction that Bernie Sanders is getting. It would have just been implausible. I mean, look at the shifts that have happened on gay marriage just in the past few years. I mean, Hillary Clinton's a prime example of someone who's shifted on multiple issues, including that one. So I do think that they've gone farther to the left, but they're not defensive about it because the country or the culture seems to be with them on it. So I think that's sort of the difference, is that I don't think they're putting themselves in danger because I think that they're at least they believe that they are in the mainstream of American opinion on a lot of this stuff. So when you believe that you're with the mainstream, then your body language is different, and it's less divisive. So I think that we've become sort of inured to some of this stuff too. I mean, nothing. It's sort of like one of those things where I can go to a movie or something and come out, and my wife will be like, there were so many F words in there, or so many people got killed. And I'm like, I thought it could have been rated G or something. I didn't even, were there F bombs dropped? And the point is you become inured to it. I think that we've become desensitized to creeping leftism. Are you there, Bill? Or did I leave you speechless?
Oh, so you cut off for a little bit at the end.
Okay, I thought I left you speechless.
No. Impossible. I do. There's one element, though, that I do wonder might have some negative consequences for Democrats going forward, and that's guns.
Yeah.
Because Democrats have essentially since 2000, gradually went farther and farther away from their gun control emphasis. They never really changed position, but they definitely decreased the emphasis more and more. And that really was capped in 2008 when the Supreme Court ruled that there was an individual right to bear arms, and Obama was very sotto voce about that in the general election. The thinking being there are some single-issue gun voters out there, particularly Colorado, Ohio, Iowa. These are swing states. In 2008, it was also in Indiana, North Carolina. They didn't really compete as hard for those in 2012. North Carolina, they competed, they lost. But so you got a handful of states like that where downplaying the gun issue seemingly helped Obama win states that Democrats were not able to win in 2000, 2004. It's a new proposition whether after Sandy Hook and after Oregon and after some of these other shootings, is there? I mean, Hillary's not talking about banning handguns.
Yeah. And Hillary,
background checks, but there's an emphasis to it that Obama did not have in 2008 or 2012, and how that would play in a general, I think, is unknown.
Yeah, I agree. That's the one area that is interesting. She went after the NRA very hard, but if you listen to the way they talk about it, they all talk about common sense, gun control, closing the so-called gun show loophole, etc. So I think they're still,
But that was 2000, 2004 also. It was always, we're not taking your guns away. We responsible hunters and sportsmen, should have their guns. It's assault weapons that no one needs, and gun show loopholes so we can do background checks. They always tried that, but it fed a narrative that this is just the the camel's nose in the tent and they're going to grab your guns. And so Obama just said, "Screw it. Let's just not talk about this."
Yeah, and it worked.
It goes away.
And it worked. And now maybe I guess the point being this, maybe this is a case study. Maybe this is the one area where they're getting out over their skis on, and they assume that because everything else in the culture's changed, that it's emboldened them to maybe go farther or harder left on this as a sort of liberal litmus test. And maybe it's a way to attack Bernie from his former positions. Maybe it will come back to haunt them, Bill. That's an interesting point. No matter how careful they try to be with the language, maybe it will.
I mean, I think what we can't know is, will Hillary dial back the emphasis on it in a general? But the thing at this point, we're having these, the public mass shooting numbers have gone up, even though overall homicides have gone down.
Yeah.
And even mass shootings have stayed flat, but public mass shootings have gone up. And there aren't that many of those, but there are enough, obviously, that you see them on TV.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it, too, is now it's not a local crime story. I mean,
right.
When it happens, it's leading the news, it's on Twitter, you're not going to not know. It's not going to be
and we're getting them roughly, 4 or 5 times a year. So the odds of one happening during the general election is pretty decent, I have to say. Yeah. And I don't say that with any kind of glee, of course.
The problem is, and I forget, I think it was Greg Sargent over at the Washington Post had a piece up arguing that it's understandable why gun control activists try to use these big events to draw attention to their cause, but it's actually counterproductive because none of the gun control measures would stop these mass shootings, or few of them would, whereas you could argue, according to Sargent and the person he was talking to, that gun control actually might stop some of these sort of other fatalities that are not as not the mass shootings that don't get as much attention, for what that's worth.
So this whole issue could very well be really front and center in a general election, and how it would play in these swing states, I think, is pretty unknown.
Indeed. I think I'm going to have to jump here, but anything else that we should hit on our way out?
I mean, obviously, the world is waiting for Lincoln Chafee to be now named vice president after that dominating performance. He really was the breakout candidate, but we'll have to delve into what makes Lincoln Chafee so appealing next time.
I think it's the metric system, Bill. Clearly. All right, another great episode. Check out my...
Who among us did have a bad first day at work? That's all I have to say.
Oh, yeah, right. So that's his first vote was against or for repealing Glass-Steagall. That's what it was, right?
Right.
That's a tough one. All right. So let's plug some stuff, Bill. You got a piece in RCP. You got a piece in Politico magazine. What should they read?
Well, my piece for Politico was the debate preview, which I think actually was a pretty on point preview, but it's a bit past its prime now. But go read my piece from Real Clear Politics on why Boehner and McCarthy failed to stand up to the right-wing bullies of the Freedom Caucus, when clearly there's no ducking this fight. They are for whoever gets in that speaker's chair has to deal with these nihilists, and just trying to pretend this whole thing will go away is not working out for them. So I know all the conservatives on that thread think I'm nuts, but read it for yourself. Tell me what you think.
All right, check out my podcast. Some interesting people I've been talking to. We're going to talk to Jay Nordlinger, who wrote a piece called, I think it's called Children of Monsters, something like that. It's about the children of dictators. He's coming on the podcast soon. I'm talking to Homer Hickam, who wrote the book Rocket Boys, also known as October Sky. He's got a new book out. He's coming on the podcast soon. Yesterday I talked to a guy called Todd Lindbergh, who wrote a book about heroes and heroism in the modern and ancient era. So check out Matt Lewis in the News podcast and pre-order this book, people. It's called Too Dumb to Fail. and pre-order that at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy fine books.
So we are 3 months away from publication date?
It seems like so far out. It seems ridiculous that I've been hawking this thing for so long, and yet I swear, Bill, it seems like 3 months does not seem like enough time to me at this point. It's crazy. I've gotten some great blurbs. Yuval Levin, Hugh Hewitt, Arthur Brooks, Kirsten Powers. Who am I leaving out? Lots of good people. Tucker Carlson. Just amazing testimonies. People who've been incredibly generous. Peggy Noonan gave me a blurb. Great people. Hugh Hewitt writes.
Very nice.
Hugh Hewitt wrote the foreword for the book. I'm probably forgetting somebody. Great, awesome people who were doing that, and of course, Bill, you were incredibly helpful in editing and brainstorming ideas. But it's catching on, man.
I give you a blurb, but I want you to sell books, so I'll refrain.
Well, yeah, thank you. We thought about having you attack the book as a liberal, if that might help our publicity. So anyway,
more dumbness.
Yes, I think you might have a conflict of interest on this one. Check all that stuff out.
All right, sir. Good to talk to you. I'd love to talk to you on post-debate days.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good talking to you. And follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Don't forget you can listen to this podcast, too. Check that out. And we'll see you back here in the DMZ. Thanks, Bill.
All right.
See ya.